Hello everybody, I'm Marco from GAM Guitar Amp Modelers & Co., the first Italian channel about digital gear for guitar. In this video, which is a video that I wanted to do since quite some time, I wanted to explore a little bit the boundaries of the Line6 Helix. It's a device that I have since some months and I'm really enjoying it. And what I like as a nerd guy as I am, is the great freedom that you have with the routing. And when you begin to go towards the uncommon and try to experiment and really push the boundaries, you can really get very interesting sounds. So, without further ado, let's call the HX Edit software. And I will walk you through some paths. And some of them it's patches, obviously. And some patches are patches that I use currently live, and I have project where I need very weird and very diverse sound because it combines folk and electronica. While other patches, and this is the disclaimer, are really just me going wild, experimenting, so they might not necessarily be usable in a musical context or a production context, but could be nonetheless a starting point to get somewhere. So let's start with the first one, and this is looks pretty complicated as a patch. It basically is based on two main signals coming in. One is the magnetic pickups of this guitar, which is a Line 6 Variax, and this will be an important element because this guitar is capable of modeling different tunings, freeform tunings, doubling strings like the 12 strings guitar, and emulate guitar, electric guitar, and acoustic models. And being Line 6, it interfaces directly with the Helix, so I can control this guitar from the Helix, from the patches that I program here. And so we have a first path here, up here, which is a classical gain staging phase, couple of overdrives, then the amp and impulse response and so on. Really nothing strange. Goes through here to a couple of equalization stages. And I will explain these volumes later. And then it converges here with the second path, which starts from here, where I'm picking the Variax. Now, the difference between these two inputs is that this is the original sounds of the pickup, while here I can pick the sound of the modeling. Ignore this part because it was just for a live use, so it's all this part is really not used. And this other signal, and I will show you how I use it here in this context, will also have some dynamics EQ time-based effect. So I programmed on my Helix different snapshots and usual arrangement. So clean a crunch, rhythm, lead sound with the opportunity to switch effects on and off. Pretty basic. So let's start with the clean. You can switch delay. It's slightly slightly near the breakup. Crunch. All pretty standard, but it's interesting. There are other, let's say, hidden snapshots, and they are accessible in this way. If I press on the clean program, but hold pressed, what I get in the end is an acoustic sound, which leverages the models that the Variax is capable of emulating. It's a pretty compressed sound, or I have another snapshot which leverages another model, which is the guitar electric seater emulation of the Variax. Let's go and see another sound. This one is called Octavarian, no relationships with Dream Theater, although I love them as a band. And here also I do the same thing. I have two kinds of inputs, one from the magnetic pickups and one from the Variax emulation. You can see the little pickup over the V that stands for the magnetic sound, the actual sound of these guys here. What's interesting though is that the pickup signal doesn't go through any amplifier. It gets pitch shifted twice, and it goes through a distortion, and it goes through a cabinet, but no amplifier, no preamplifier. Because I needed a weird artificial kind of sound with all the layering of pitches. While here, again, there is some acoustic sound, nothing really going on, just some modulation. And something that I usually do, I put a little room with almost zero decay in order just to give some three-dimensionality to the sound. It doesn't really add a tail. I do it also in the previous sound. Here, the distorted sound uses this room reverb with zero decay, as you can see from the data here. Okay, and let's hear the difference. It's subtle. Without, the sound is perfectly centered, and with it has this slight room ambience that helps it to make it a little bit more tridimensional and present. And another thing that I forgot to explain is these volumes things. As you can see, I use different paths, and sometimes I have to switch. So I have to choose whether the sound must come from the first or the second or even the third path. Some patches are even that complex. And one way to do this is by leveraging the splits. So you can go into not unifying split like this, but maybe a dividing one. And you program controllers in order to choose where to steer the signal towards the upper or lower side of the split. Although it's much faster to just take a volume block with the volume at 0. So when this is bypassed, it does nothing. When this is activated with the volume at 0, it completely shuts down the sound. It acts literally as a gate. So by basically alternating, it's much better visible in the other patch where I use these volumes here in the beginning. You see at the left-hand side of both signal paths. And also here, ignore the third one. You see, they switch when one is on, the other is off, and vice versa. And here is how I can choose between the upper or the lower part with just controlling the bypasses. Fast hack, the only downside is obviously that you have to reserve one block of your signal chain to the volume. So it might be an annoyance or not. And here I switch from the basic acoustic sound. It's a folk electronica. You imagine it alternates between a very tribal and very techno part, and the first one goes like this. There is a bit of doubling effect, just some ambient, and then it goes here. It's a very weird sound, no amplifier, just distortion and pitching, and it has some, when you layer octaves, you always have this kind of organ kind of sensation because you're basically layering harmonics like an organ. Imagine the various drawbars of a Hammond, something like that. And you have this kind of a sonic sensation with it. So let's go forward. And this patch is not really interesting from an effect point of view. There are some effects, but it's normal modulations or whatever time-based effect. It's just an example on how properly equalized and with proper dynamics and the acoustic patches of the Variax can be believable. I don't like the electric emulations here. Variax has a very known problem with palm mutings, so I use usually the natural pickups without any electric emulations, but acoustics can be usable. You can hear that they are fake, but they are quite usable, at least in a live context. So quite nice, usable. The name is the name of an Arabic slash Turkish instrument, and I use it just because sometimes I like to play things like this. With microtonal bendings and some Eastern flavor. So let's go on. This introduces a very important topic. And the topic is that you have a lot of very interesting time-based effects, and delays and reverbs. Other than the plain ones that are just repetitions, you can modulate. There is flutter, tape echo simulation, a lot of different options on this machine. What if you are greedy like me and want more? Well, one of the useful techniques is to split the signal. So you have a path, which in here is the upper one, where the sound is dry, and the lower one, where the sound is 100% wet. And this gives you the freedom to treat the wet part further. So you are essentially enhancing an effect that is already present. This is again an acoustic patch. So what you hear are these reverse delays, but I am enhancing them by putting modulation here, which is a rotor speaker, which gives more movement and makes the sound a little bit more interesting. This also is a patch that is not notable from a signal chain point of view. It's just interesting because it shows how I can recall the modals of this guitar directly from the Helix snapshots. So I have one snapshot per instrument. So I have the first one, for example, guitar again. Then we have the 12th string. And what's really cool and interesting is the third one. So, look. No sound. No sound. Sound. With the Variax, I can selectively exclude strings. So in this case, I made this preset where the low E and the high E don't produce a sound. I don't know if you hear something from the microphone, but in the Helix, there is really no sound produced. And I can restrict all the action to the 4 central strings. So I decide which strings are going to play and which not. Why? I want to emulate a bouzouki, which is this guy here. It's originally a Greek instrument, which has also been adopted by the Irish. And the Irish version has 4 couples of strings. I can show you. You see? 1, 2, 3, 4. But they are doubled. So it has 2 strings that are doubled by an octave and 2 strings that are doubled in a unison. And the tuning is obviously also different. And what's interesting is that I can recall the tuning of a bouzouki, which in my case is G-D-A-D. And I can use the fingerings of the bouzouki just pretending I am playing 4 strings, the 4 central ones, and not 6. And I can use all the fingers and pattern I use on that instrument there. Or And plus, I can recall whatever other model I want. And I think it's pretty cool. So this is Beowulf. Again, don't mind the names. They're really, really, really random. And this has two paths. And you can see that the paths are completely independent. You can see it from the right-hand side. The arrow goes straight to the left. It means that this signal goes straight to the output. And the first pass is fed from the Werks pickup. Again, nothing special, crunchy sound, some ambient, and that's it. The second path has no origin. So what does it do? It uses the infamous 3-note oscillator, which is an effect that doesn't treat the guitar sound, but rather creates a new sound, a synth sound. The problem is that usually these sounds are really boring because they are very simple waveforms like sine, triangle. So you will need to put some modulation and some ambient to make them interesting. And plus, this effect can do chords, and you can assign different notes to each snapshot, which means that you can literally change chords with your feet while improvising. I will do it with my hands, obviously now, because my Helix is here on the desk, but I can assure it's really, really comfortable. And I will do a short demo about this. Pretty cool, huh? So with basically with a bypass command, with one foot switch, I can turn on and off this effect. And with a snapshot, I change the notes. I can literally play the Helix like a synth. There are some crazy people who actually use the Helix like a synth somewhere on the internet. So another cool sound is this one. In again acoustic, and here I use pitch shifting, and you will see that pitch shifting is the base of the weirdest sound always. What is notable of this is that I use the polycapo. I use it a lot because I feel it's the only true polyphonic and reliable pitch shifter. The others, when you do chords, tend to sound a bit like crap. And here you can even choose the balance between speed of the tracking and accuracy of the tracking itself. So, here's how it sounds. This comes from actually the Variax model, so which means I can use this knob to change the tuning. So if I want to drop the tuning, easy peasy. Or drop down to B, but doesn't sound really good usually. So I just have fun with this very lush, rich double sound sometimes. So let's go. Psycho Strings is leveraging the so-called Odoswell effect. The Odoswell is the effect that when you attack the note, opens up the volume, so it leaves the attack and it has this really string-like effect. It's a pretty common one, but here I play a lot with pitch shifting, and there are 1 and 2 pitch shifter in action just to mangle a bit with the sound. Sounds like this. And it's interesting how the texture of the sound changes slightly depending on the pickup. So with the neck pickup, we have a mellower sound. With the bridge pickup, it's a slightly harsher one. Just a tiny story about the name. Why it's called Psycho Strings? Because I tried to put also this octisynth, just experimenting, because why not? And yeah, the result is not really so entertaining, but you can do this stuff. And I think this is familiar, right? So let's go. Let's go way down in the set list because I have another bunch of interesting one. So here we are in complete synth territory. Let's talk about the synths of the Helix. I don't like them. They usually sound very bad, and the other problem is that basically all of them seem not to have attack. You can do like before, you can put modulations and time effects to enrich the sound, thus making the dull sound more interesting. But I found with the synths, another really interesting thing to do is layering. So using different synths, and in this case, you see the path is a bit complex. I use 3 synths which are superimposed. In one case, there is a distortion fitted into a synth. It doesn't change the kind of sound that it comes because the synth is generating sound by itself. It doesn't need the guitar. It needs just for the note. This distortion is just to feed more sound into the synth, and basically it's a bit like a sustainer compressor for the synth. Impulse response, just ways to treat the sound and try to do something interesting. Another synth here. And then the upper path goes here and it unites with this other path, and all the 3 paths gets treated with the last modulations and time effect. So here is how it sounds. It has a snappy attack. It's so difficult to find in the Helix synths, though I like that one of the synths I put was on purpose just to provide this attack sound. And the tracking is reasonably good. You can do also pretty fast stuff. You have to be careful to be really clean and play almost staccato. You see, it's not perfect because when I change strings, I'm not clean enough. With some effort, even maybe sweep pickings are possible. Maybe would need some practice, but still, it's interesting. And the cool thing of the sound is also that it reacts differently depending on the strength of your picking. So the more I push, the more the sound opens. So this is perfect to any kind of electronica stuff, doing rhythm parts. You can do leads and melodies. And obviously you can tweak the sound. So you have 3 synths that you can tweak with countless possibilities. Sparkly swell is based on an auto swell again, so this slowly opening kind of sound. And here again, I'm trying to enhance the sound by splitting the path and leveraging filters. So when I play, you have this beautiful shimmer with this ever-changing bubbly filter going on. And here again we have a polycapo that basically is giving an octave above, because otherwise it would sound this way. A trick that I use is I make a chord blend in and then I arpeggiate, so you can hear the attack this time. You can do a lot of things with dynamics. This other effect. This is interesting because it's basically on 2 different delay lines. One delay line is a normal delay at 1/4. Then there is the other delay line. You can see it below this arch, which is pitch shifted again and goes into dotted eighths. So you have 3/4 kinds superimposing things, a polyrhythm that you can hear in the repetitions. I will do a very snappy one. And also there are modulations to move the repetitions into the panorama and make it more interesting. Now we enter in the psychosis territory. I don't know. And just listen to, I just wanted to know if I could make my Helix play a melody. And yeah, it kind of does it. I play just one note and then the whole melody comes from it. Obviously, I don't think this is very usable in a song contest, but the interesting part is this one. I can easily generate, let's bypass this one for a moment. So I have this pitch delay that is generating these notes, but it's limited to few notes. What if I want more? One very nice trick is to use a delay and very transparent one with the feedback to the minimum, so it makes only one repetition, and this repetition is perfectly similar to the original and 100% wet. Obviously you don't want dry signal. What this does, it basically, this echo just offsets the sound in the future for a little bit, so I can store some sounds and just output them at a later moment. And this is how I got the first series of notes and then some other notes, one after the others, just by cleverly leveraging the time intervals. And if you are in horror movies, might come handy. This one is very nice, nothing special, there are almost no effects, but it really leverages the Helix tuning capabilities. You can tune strings individually, and when you detune them, they usually sound a little bit fakeish. But I discovered that if you detune an acoustic kind of sound, it reminds you a little bit of double bass, and so you can do patches like this. So basically, These two strings are acting like the bass, and these four are your normal guitar. So you can do whatever you can do with bass guitar. Yeah. Yeah, slapping maybe needs still a little bit of work. So let's go. This is a series that I call Blip, and they are all similar sounds in the concept. So they're just based on usually pitch shift delay line that is separated. You can see the loop in the lower path. And with different modulation, I can obtain different kinds of sounds. Here we have this lo-fi kind of fluttery tape recording kind of thing, and a tremolo with a pure guitar sound. There's no amplifier in between. Another variation uses an amplifier and a different kind of modulation. And this is super cool. I like it a lot because it reminds me there is an organ playing on the background. And similar also this third one. This also is interesting. It's basically based on two competing Asheville pattern effect. And also here, the goal is to create games and rhythms and therefore accents and therefore movement between competing but rhythmically coherent paths. And here again, I use an amplifier at the beginning, an impulse response, and then I split and pitch shift effect and then reunite the paths. And what I obtain is this. There is also a controller, by the way, before I play, that changes the pitch shifting here from minus 12 semitones to plus 12. So one octave below and one octave above. One octave below, it's like this. Now I change pitch shifting. It's so cool. Doesn't seem a guitar, which is the thing I like. So this other one, other craziness. It reminds the effect of before, just let's see how many notes I can cram in. And here I use two delays and again, another third delay, which is this one just to offset the sound. And the polycapos, I mean, just playing with synths and pitch shifting. It's just a mess, but it was cool. And because the pitch shifting is harmonized, it stays on scale. So... And you could play with some settings, maybe the speed, the feedback of the delay. You can obtain some kind of interesting sounds. And also, I mean, from error comes sometimes a lot of solutions. And here I was experimenting with extreme detuning, which is horrible. I mean, who wants to hear a string like this? But, you know, you try things and you discover you can do this. So percussion with your guitar, why not? And then we have post-swell, which is based on the concept that we have a swell, but then a repetition. And the repetition, though, are offset and spaced in the way that they fall on the weak beats, a bit like reggae. And this is another kind of experiment. I would just wanted to replicate an old radio kind of sound. And this is just really just modulation and a very hard EQ on the sound. For example, and I made the expression pedal capable of morphing between this sound and a modern one. And this is the last sound is really just another experiment, and it's not really even a nice sound in my opinion. It's just more a concept. Push things to the limit and see what happens. In this case, the whole experiment was experimenting with super short delay repetition. In this case, we have this delay which has 0.6 millisecond repetition, 99% feedback, and it's a pitch echo that goes down 2.8 cents for each repetition. And here's what happens. We obtain a phasing. It's in reality, I think it should be a combing kind of filter because there are moving harmonics. And the fun thing about this kind of filtering is that it reminds the phaser, but instead of oscillating, it goes always the same direction. And there was a Line 6 effect called barber pole that mimicked also this kind of behavior. And also here you can change parameters and see what happens. So changing the sense upwards. And the possibilities are endless. Yeah, so that was basically it. And I hope that it was a nice journey. Just push your Helix to the limit, have fun. Even if you don't use the sounds, sometimes they're just really, really fun just to take and play and just noodle with those. And maybe some nice idea would come. In the end, even the sounds that I ended up using were experiments. They were just nice enough to have a function in a creative context. And it was a pleasure, and see you next time.